Hades was a cursed noble who gave up on living and was ready to destroy the world. However, before this, a baddie traveled back in time just to marry him, making him fall in love so hard, it cured his depression and erectile dysfunction, so now all he wants to do is to clap some cheeks. Before Hades met his beloved Jill, she was being chased by some guards led by her toxic fiancé Gerard, who wanted to execute her because she caught him kissing his own sister Ferris. After disarming her, Gerard made the guards seize her for execution. However, she managed to break free and ran to the edge of the roof, where she told Gerald she was casting him away before jumping off. As she fell, the guards fired arrows at her, which she deflected until Gerald's magic spear came flying towards her, and seeing that she was going to die, she wished things could have been different. After she died, the clock on the castle walls began to move backwards, as she was now traveling through time. Jill woke up to the sight of her parents, which surprised her because they died a long time ago. They informed her that it was Gerald's birthday and took her to the ballroom. There, she instantly remembered this was the same day when Gerald proposed to her, so when he made his entrance, she ran away faster than Gear 5 Luffy. Jill went to the balcony of the building where Gerald approached her and tried to riz her up. She ran away from him once again, but he kept chasing her until she pulled a desperation move by grabbing the cape of Hades and announcing that he was the one she was engaged to. Hades was a cursed emperor of a neighboring land who was fated to bring destruction upon their kingdom in 6 years' time. Hades accepted her proposal in the most rizful way possible, and this literally made Jill's tiny brain catch fire. Later that night, Hades came to check on Jill in her room, and he got on his knees once again as he humbly proposed to her, and Jill remembered how this dude used to be a demonic and ruthless commander on the battlefield in the original timeline. Hades then started simping for her, and their sweet time was interrupted when Gerald came by to oppose their engagement. Gerald reminded Hades that his parents wouldn't approve, and also informed him that it was decided within the inner circles of the kingdom that he would be the one to marry Jill. He then accused Hades of interfering with internal matters and tried to corner him with his guards, but Hades reminded him of their difference in power by freezing him, and his guards using mere words while walking away with Jill. In the hallway, Hades promised Jill that he'd protect her and then teleported with her onto a boat that was sailing towards his home nation, the Rave Kingdom. On the boat, she asked him how serious he was about the proposal, and Bro gleefully told her about his plans to start a family with her since she had great magic power. However, she crushed his dreams by telling him the proposal was a ruse, and this makes his pet dragon god named Rave to laugh at him. She apologized to him for tricking him, and he promised to take her back home before thanking her for giving hope to a miserable loner like him. However, she realized that by rejecting him, she was treating him just as horribly as Gerard treated her, so she reproposed to him and promised to devote her life to making him happy. Hades asked if she was serious, and she instantly told him yes, but before he could start partying with Rave, she said she wanted their marriage to only be a name for the meantime. However, Hades didn't even let her finish talking before hugging her tightly, while telling her he was fine with her condition with a wide smile on his face. He thanked her and promised to take good care of her before apologizing for moving without thinking. Hades then confessed that he was just as clueless about romance as the weebs currently watching this video, and he promised to prove the sincerity of his intent to her. He followed up by kissing her hand and asking Rave to bestow his blessings upon his new wife, causing Rave to magically manifest a ring on her finger, which Hades revealed to be the dragon consort's ring. He explained that it was proof that she'd received the dragon god's blessings as the emperor's wife, and assured her that she wouldn't have to worry about losing it since it didn't come off easily. He promised to protect her forever, and just then, the boat started vibrating as it was being attacked from all angles. Jill suggested a counterattack and Hades tried to stop her, but he suddenly fell to the ground out of exhaustion. He told Rave to take Jill to safety, but Jill refused and said she'd rather protect her new hubby. Using magic, she flew outside the boat and tossed the entire boat into the sky without breaking a sweat. When another cannonball was fired at them, she unlocked her inner Saitama as she destroyed it with a single punch, and she thought to herself that the fact that Jill sacrificed himself to save her was enough reason for her to be his hero. When Hades' boat landed on the shore, Jill informed the guards that they'd just escaped an enemy attack before telling them to take Hades to a hospital where they could treat his wounds. As the guards lifted Hades away, Rave thanked Jill for saving them and advised her not to speak too loudly to him because people would think she's crazy given the fact that they couldn't see him. She read the name Baleberg on one of the flags, and when Rave asked if she'd heard of it, she said she heard of a Baleberg massacre before but stopped talking when she realized that those events were yet to occur in this timeline. Just then, a girl started asking the guards about Hades, and the guards tried to explain to her that he was in a bad condition, but she demanded to see him because she heard he'd brought back a new maiden. Rave introduced the girl to Jill as her love rival named Sphere, who was the daughter of the local lord, Marquess Bale, and a candidate to become Hades' fiancé. Sphere then started ranting about how she'd never let her have Hades meet Sword, and Jill couldn't even muster up words to reply to the display of silliness she was witnessing before the jealous vixen ran away. Some hours later, Jill sat in a room thinking about the Baleberg massacre she heard about. Back then, during a feast thrown to celebrate the Emperor's return from Kratos, Emperor Hades objected to the idea of Sphere becoming his fiancée, causing her to have the mother of all crash-outs by murdering all other candidates before setting fire to the place and unaliving herself. In the present, Jill realized that she didn't want to lose any of her family back home or her soldiers, and she started to get teary-eyed as she remembered some of her friends named Zeke and Camilla before Rave suddenly showed up to check on her. When he asked her what was wrong, she said she was okay and then asked about the Emperor's condition. Rave said he just woke up and informed her that the first thing the goofy lover boy did when he woke up was to ask if his amethyst Jill was real or another one of his Gunnar fantasies. Just then, Hades walked into the room wearing an apron as he presented Jill with some croissants he made, and he explained that he did it because he'd heard that the secret to a harmonious marriage was to first captivate the stomach. He then tried to rizz Jill up by saying he'd make her love him, but that only creeped her out and she tried to resist his temptations, but he made her fold by feeding her one of the croissants. She then brought up the fact that snuck out of the palace while asking him what brought him there, and he replied that he just wanted to see her face before telling her that the reason she wasn't released from confinement or allowed to come see him at the infirmary was because of his complicated relationship with Marquess Bale. When Jill asked Hades if he was really cursed, he told her that the reason he was removed from the line of succession despite being a prince was due to his mother's status as a concubine, and after he was sent to the Borderlands, his own mother called him a monster because of the fact that he could see Rave. On one of his past birthdays, his older brother, who was the prince, suddenly died, and every birthday that followed, the princes of the kingdom died one after another in gruesome ways. Eventually, the king made Hades the crown prince out of fear, and his mother unalived herself in response, which was how the moniker Cursed Emperor was born. Jill started worrying for him, so he calmed her nerves by telling her that things were peaceful in the kingdom since his brother, Prince Vissel, persuaded everyone to support him. However, Jill knew that Vissel would end up double-crossing him by snitching to their enemies, and Hades would end up executing all of his siblings. Jill then asked about his battle plans against his enemies, and Hades said he'd thoroughly crush Bale, but Jill said she'd do it in his place as his wife. This made Bro go into simp mode, and he eventually collapsed. A while later, Jill wore a disguise, and she overheard Sphere telling her dad Bale about her concerns that Hades would reject her. Just then, some armored ruffians started bullying Sphere, so Jill stepped in to save her. Meanwhile, Bale told Hades that Jill hired some ruffians to kidnap his daughter and asked him to withdraw his army so he could handle the ruffians himself. Despite knowing that it's a ruse, Hades gave him permission but stated that he'd atone if he finds out that Jill is innocent. At the same time, Jill and Sphere were tossed into a cell by the ruffians, and while they were there, Sphere told Jill that she used to be a social outcast due to the fact that she was friends with a dragon until Hades befriended her. Back then, she confessed her feelings to him, but he turned her down because she wasn't a lowly. Just then, the guards tossed some people into that cell, and Jill went into tears when she realized that they were her old pals Zeke and Camilla. She realized that nothing had been taken from her yet in that timeline, and she decided that she wouldn't lose those dear to her this time. On a particular night in the previous timeline, Zeke told Jill that he and Camilla didn't have magic because they were from the Rave Empire, and when she asked why they came to Kratos, Camilla said she'd forgotten since it was too long ago for her to remember. In the present, Camilla tried to console Jill by insulting Zeke, but he shut her up by headbutting her, and the two of them started bickering until Jill stunned them by breaking her chains off. Jill proceeded to destroy the chains of everyone in the room and told them they needed to begin strategizing by comparing their information. After hours of sharing intel between themselves, Camilla summarized their info by saying the ruffians disguised themselves as northern soldiers in order to infiltrate the kingdom and took Marquis Bale's daughter hostage while occupying the harbor. Zeke asked why they disguised themselves as northern forces who were meant to defend the port, and Sphere joined their conversation by telling Zeke and Camilla that she heard from the ruffians that Jill was the one causing all the commotion. Camilla then turned into a Walmart Sherlock Holmes as she deduced that Bale would deploy his personal soldiers in order to quell the unrest, and after those soldiers defeat the ruffians, they'd have the northern soldiers withdraw from Baleburg after deciding that they had no worth there. She also pointed out that if Jill was the one who instigated the events, that along with the issue of the northern forces would reflect poorly on the Emperor, and if Sphere dies, the Marquess would be able to do whatever he wanted. Zeke said it made him sick that the scumbag Bale was willing to use his own daughter as a sacrifice, and Camilla introduced an ally of hers named Guard, who was guarding the room of Jill before joining them. When Zeke asked what the situation was, Guard said the ruffians came over to ask where Jill was, and he told them that he had no idea. Zeke said it was odd that they were asking for the one who was supposedly giving them orders, and Camilla pointed out that the idea of Jill directing them was a bald-faced lie before implying that Bale was the real mastermind. Camilla guessed that they were leaving them alone at the moment because they can't find Jill, but said they'd eventually come to deal with them, and Zeke added that they'd have no choice but to leave the Empire when Bale's forces show up. Guard suggested telling Hades about the situation, but Camilla said it was pointless because, as a commoner, he'd only end up as one in a mountain of corpses that this chaos would cause. Sphere said she'd tell him, but Zeke and Camilla refused the idea because they had their hands full trying to survive and didn't have time to save her from trouble. However, Sphere told them to run away while she stayed there and said it wouldn't be easy for them to unalive her since she was close friends with Hades. She also stated that they'd need her testimony as a victim if they can't find Jill, and said she'd find a way to tell the Emperor the truth because Hades would surely understand that none of them are at fault if she explained properly to him. Hearing this, Jill realized in the previous timeline, Sphere stayed behind so that Camilla and the others could escape, and she ended up dying after being made to take all of her father's dishonor. She wondered if that was the full story behind the Baleburg massacre, but then she told them that there was a way for all of them to survive before taking off the disguise she was wearing. To the shock of everyone, Jill put on her normal clothes and introduced herself as the one being cloned as the spy before saying they had a chance at victory since the enemy didn't know her whereabouts. She then claimed that they'd rescue the imprisoned members of the Northern forces, protect Sphere, and take the port back from the traitors. Camilla loved the idea because it meant that the Northern forces could clear their names, making it obvious that it was Bale who raised suspicion that Jill was a spy. Zeke also indicated interest, and Jill told Sphere that she was the key to their mission's success before promising to protect her. She then asked Sphere the shock of a lifetime by asking her to formally accuse her father, and told her that she'd also be disposed of if she couldn't pull it off. Sphere asked Jill why she was trying to save her despite being a love rival, and Jill explained that she and Hades were married in name only despite having zero romantic feelings for each other. Sphere was worried that Jill would betray Hades since their marriage was only in name, but Jill assured her that they had reasons for choosing each other before revealing her promise to make Hades happy. Meanwhile, Hades sent Rave to go check on Jill and revealed that he plans to dispose of Bale and make Baleburg fall under his control. Back at the prison cell, Sphere finally agreed to formally accuse her father, and Jill promised to protect her before praising her for being courageous. Jill then told Camilla and Zeke that they have to settle things before Bale's forces arrive so that they wouldn't hog all the glory, and said the first order of business was freeing the imprisoned Northern forces in order to swell their numbers. Afterwards, she destroyed the wall with a Detroit smash, knocking out one of the prison guards in the process before saying some motivating words to the gang. Some minutes later, she burst through the window of the church where the Northern soldiers were being held and soloed all the guards in the room before the rest of the team arrived. She explained the situation to the Northern soldiers before giving an Erwin Smith-level speech to them that motivated them to join her in battle. Rave informed Hades about his wife's impressive actions and told him her plan could make him eventually become an emperor whom everyone loved. Just then, some guards showed up to evacuate Hades to a safe location, but he saw through their pretense and put them down with his magic. Elsewhere, Jill and the Northern forces were hiding out in a fortress they crested when the enemy leader named Hugo came by and tried to blackmail the Northern forces into giving Jill up as a sacrifice. Hearing this, Jill made them send her out while tied up in a rope, and when Hugo tried to finish her off with his axe, she easily broke free from the rope before taking out all the enemy forces in sight. Inside the fortress, an old priest tried to assassinate Sphere, but Zeke stopped him. Jill tried to convince Hugo to admit to Hades that Bale was the mastermind, but they were interrupted when Bale's forces suddenly started unaliving his men. When Bale arrived, Jill said he was too late because she'd already subdued the port, but then he pulled out his trump card, which was a large dragon. The dragon tried to fire a breath attack at Jill, but it retreated when Hades arrived and introduced himself as the Dragon Emperor. Hades continued his aura farming masterclass by stylishly leaping to the ground, and when Bale asked what he was doing there, Hades said he couldn't leave his wife in danger while hiding somewhere safe. With a wave of his hand, he made the dragon run away, and then he carried Jill while asking her about the naval port. Jill gave him a formal report by informing him that the word of the port's occupation was a distraction ploy by the enemy before telling him that the Northern forces saved Lady Sphere and herself from the enemy while defending the port. However, the shameless oaf Bale accused Jill of being a spy and said the enemy was still present at the port before begging him to remain at the palace. He then tried to gaslight them by saying he'd tell the people that Hades spared the girl who worked with ruffians, and the bandits started to feel bad that their leader was treating them like disposable trash until Hades threw a curveball by suddenly grabbing Hugo by the neck. He thanked Camilla, Zeke, and Guard for all their help before telling Hugo that the duty of his unit among the Northern forces was to provide information on the mastermind behind all the chaos. Hugo was stunned by the fact that Hades was recruiting him to join the Northern forces, so Hades explained that his wife wanted to save everyone including the disposable pieces before threatening to unalive him if he didn't speak immediately. Terrified by Hades' overwhelming aura, Hugo ordered his ruffians to bow before him, and in response, all the Northern soldiers in the room, including the former ruffians, bowed before the Sigma Lord. Hugo then informed Hades that the mastermind was Marquess Bale, so the Dark Lord walked boldly to confront him. Bale tried to debate the matter, but Hades shut him up by pinning him and his entire army to the ground with his aura, and the Emperor humiliated him even further by placing his foot on his head while telling him not to speak because he was already as good as dead. Hades then brought up the promise he made to destroy him if Jill was deemed innocent, and Sphere rushed out of the church while Hades started thinking of the perfect way to execute him. As Sphere watched, he asked the scumbag Marquess if his second wife and daughter were doing well before threatening to unalive them in the most brutal ways possible. Bale started begging, so Hades told him the only way to save them was to offer him Baleburg, and Sphere wondered what would happen to her father. So Jill explained that his life would be spared if he confessed to his crimes and surrendered the city of Baleburg. Sphere was surprised and Jill was pleased because she knew Hades intended to save everyone. However, the dumb Marquess couldn't take the hint as he suddenly started insulting Hades by saying no one wanted a cursed scumbag like him to rule. Just when Jill was about to lose it, Hades cut her off by reminding everyone that he was the Emperor whether they liked it or not before ordering his guards to take Bale away and extract as much information from Sphere as they can. Later that evening, Jill was trying to find her way around the palace when Rave appeared and showed her to her room. She asked if there weren't any servants around, so he told her that Bale was the master of that castle before that day and said his servants were so scared that they're useless. Jill then brought up the fact that Hades wasn't there during dinner and asked if he was pushing it, so Rave said he can't help it because he was an emperor who couldn't afford to look weak. Rave explained that the reason he was acting less straightforward was because he didn't want to be an emperor who ruled with fear anymore, but she said it wasn't right for him to ignore statements that hurt him like the ones Bale said because he wouldn't be able to feel anything if it became normal. With the image of Hades' old powerful form in her head, she said he'd eventually become numb to his own feelings and those of others, and Rave explained that he had a weird way of relating with people because of the curse. Rave brought up the incident with Hades' mom and said as an emperor who was a dragon god reborn, if he lost faith in people, it would mean the end of everything. Jill thanked Rave and told him that it's because of him telling Hades not to give up that the emperor became as humane as he was. Rave then took her to a room which she was meant to share with Hades, and when she started debating, he told her it was because they were a couple and as well for security. When they entered the room, they saw Hattie's drunk on the bed, so Rave entered inside his body to help him recover while Jill tended to him the normal way. When Hattie's woke up, she told him she could call someone else if he was anxious, but he said having her there was all he needed. He asked for an apple, but the clumsy princess couldn't even manage to slice an apple right, so he put her on his lap and peeled it himself. She asked him to make a rabbit, so he cut an apple into the shape of several rabbits and explained to her that he learned how to do it from his different siblings. Afterwards, she fed him the apple and started telling him about how weird her family was. Jill then apologized for making him spare the enemies instead of just unaliving them and told him to refute any degrading statements anyone says about him next time because he now had someone who wanted him to live. Bro got so flustered that his face turned into a red light bulb as he accused her of loving him, but she crushed his romantic dreams by telling him she only saw him as a little brother. However, he cuddled her on the bed and tried desperately to riz her up until she fell asleep. The next day, the lovebirds had breakfast together until Jill's new personal guards Zeke and Camilla showed up to remind her of her duties. As she walked away with them, they gave her a bit of romantic advice, and when she remembered how she got them caught up in dangerous events in the past timeline, she decided not to make any mistakes this time. She then told them about the dragon consort's ring and asked them who cursed Hades. Zeke said it was the goddess Kratos, and she narrated how the kingdoms of Kratos and Rave used to be one nation until they split. Camilla told her about a legendary magic shield that protects their land, and this made Jill realize why Hades told her the curse wouldn't activate if she's there. Just then, Sphere showed up with a letter for Jill, and when she read it, she immediately froze up. When Hades read the letter, he saw that it was Gerald saying he was coming to pick her up, so he got hyped up to face off against the idiot prince. Meanwhile, Gerald was seated on a boat, and he remembered how he was utterly humiliated when he tried to argue with Hades over his proposal with Jill. When he stood up, one of his guards informed him that they'd be arriving at the Baleberg harbor soon, and he decided that he'd verify himself whether Jill has to become the monster's dragon consort or not. Back at Baleberg, Zeke told Camilla that Gerald's upcoming visit was happening so suddenly that they didn't have time to make solid preparations, and Camilla said it was exactly what he wanted. Just then, Jill showed up in a dazzling Barbie cosplay she got from Temu, and they noticed she was wearing a grumpy expression on her face, so Sphere told her to smile like a gentlewoman. When she attempted to smile, they all winced because she looked like a cartoon villain, and she explained that she's never had the need to make a cute face before. Sphere then brought up the fact that Gerald thought she'd been kidnapped and told her that in order to deny that, she'd need to first prove that she was being treated well there by wearing a bright expression on her face. Jill told Sphere that she was strong and promised to do her best. A while later, Jill arrived at Hattie's room, and he instantly started telling her how cute she looked in the pink dress she was wearing, causing her tiny brain to overheat. He tried to suggest braiding her hair to make her look even cuter, but she instantly refused the idea by saying that he was already much cuter than she was. Zeke and Camilla interrupted their Riz battle by telling them that it was almost time for the meeting, and Hades talked about the plan to make her prove she wasn't being kidnapped by smiling before noticing the terrifying expression on her face. Some minutes later, Jill and Hades walked through the hall, and Jill confessed to him that she felt disappointed in herself for being unable to produce a cute smile before explaining that she was filled to the brim with bloodlust for Gerald. Hades decided to leave her behind so that she wouldn't meet Gerald, but she claimed that it was too dangerous since he hadn't cleared the accusations of kidnapping. Camilla told her it wouldn't work because Hades was jealous and reminded them that they're supposed to show Gerald and the others how well they get along. Hearing this, Jill reminded Hades that it was work before anything else and promised to try her hardest to smile. Hades asked her to fill her head with thoughts of him and kissed her on the cheek before telling her that her unguarded side looked adorable. He then embraced her while telling her she needed to stay soft and charmed like she currently was, and Zeke was ready to punch the ditty out of him. So he explained that it was the best way to show Prince Gerald that they get along. Jill was flustered because it was her first kiss, and the Riz Emperor asked her if she'd like to do it later when it was just the two of them, so she smacked some sense into him. When Gerald arrived, he thanked them for agreeing to meet with him and said he wanted to ask Jill some things, but she said she had nothing to say to him. Hades explained that they had a little lover's spat on the way there, and Jill tried to argue with that statement, so Hades reminded her that there was a guest present. he asked Gerald to forgive Jill for her behavior and said he was partially responsible for how she was acting. When Gerald asked what he meant, he made up a goofy story about how she slapped him because she thought he was doubting the fact that she loved him more than Gerald. Jill was impressed by the fact that he was using her anger in that way, and he apologized to Gerald for being slow to contact Jill's family before stating that he'd rather avoid any further accusations of kidnapping so that his other cheek wouldn't get smacked. The prince said it was weird that the emperor was getting slapped around by his wife, and Hattie said he was an emperor who bowed to his wife before telling Gerald to enjoy the rest of his visit. The idiot prince tried to continue the conversation, but Hattie shut him up by asking him if he wanted to be a mediator in their marital quarrel. And Jill said they didn't need a mediator because all Hattie's had to do was apologize sincerely. Hattie started trying to riz her up again, but she ignored him and told Gerald that she was sorry to have made him travel that distance because there was no need to worry about her. Gerald brought up the fact that her engagement to him was all but decided and asked her if she wanted to abandon her family for this. Jill said it was because Hattie's needs her, and Gerald replied in a devious tone that all they needed was for Hattie's to stop needing her. When Hattie's asked what he meant, Gerald brought up the fact that he needed to marry someone who can see the dragon god in order to prevent the curse, and then asked Hattie's what he'd do if Jill can't protect him from the curse. Gerald then said that if the curse had not been broken, Bale would be dead, and just then, guards showed up to inform them that something had happened to Bale in his cell. A while later, Zeke and Camilla informed Jill that Bale hung himself in his cell and said that everyone in town was scared because they believed that it was Hattie's curse that unalived him. Jill informed them that it was part of Gerald's plan, and Camilla narrated a myth about a sacred spear and how the dragon consort once unalived herself to save everyone. Just then, Sphere arrived and started attacking Jill with a spear while claiming to be the true wife of the Dragon Emperor. After she knocked out Zeke and Camilla, Jill managed to disarm her, and Hattie's tried to unalive her with his sword, but Jill explained that she was possessed by something. When the evil spirit came out of her, Jill destroyed it and chewed Hattie's out for trying to end Sphere. Hattie's then ordered Zeke and Camilla to forcefully evacuate all the women to the palace to stop the spirit from possessing them, and Jill tried to argue that being forceful will make people hate him more, but he nonchalantly told her he had no choice. That evening, she met up with Hattie's by the hallway and yelled at him over the fact that he never even called her by her name. Just then, a guard informed them that the townspeople were rioting, and when he tried to attack Hattie's, he kept Jill back with a barrier before easily taking him down. Guard then showed up and Jill told him to take care of the fires in town while he heads off to face the rioters. Jill desperately tried to stop him, but Rave told her that he couldn't hear her and informed her that the barrier they were in was the safest place in the kingdom right now. In the city, Zeke and Camilla stared at the chaos from a high ground, and Camilla wondered who Jill really was as she remembered her strategizing with them a while ago about how to deal with a situation similar to the one they were currently in. Hugo informed them that multiple fires had been set at once and said it was the arson method that Bale told him about, while hinting that Bale could still be alive like Jill predicted. Camilla asked Hugo if he'd betray them, and Hugo said he and his crew were all too aware that the Emperor saved them, which was why he'd do the work he was paid to do in order to get his life back. Zeke then informed them that some hooded men had arrived, so Camilla told Hugo to protect the town alongside his men while she and Zeke handled these assassins. After Hugo left, Zeke said everything was playing out just as Jill said it would, and Camilla noticed through her telescope that among the hooded men was Marquess Bale as well as Crown Prince Gerald. She said it was the worst possible situation, but Zeke said it was time to bring Bale back to life since he was posing as the Undertaker. Back at the palace, Jill begged Rave to let her out of the barrier so that she could help out with Hattie's situation, but Rave said there was no need to worry about Hattie's since he could turn the entire town into scorched earth in the blink of an eye if he wished for it. Jill said he'd only get lonelier if he did that and asked Rave if he was okay with that. Rave explained that no matter what he chooses, girls like Sphere would keep showing up now that the spear's been activated, and there's nothing he can do about it. Jill asked if the spear was the goddess Kratos, and Rave replied that it was a piece of the goddess that came to scout her out. He brought up the story of the magic shield in the kingdom and revealed that the goddess was looking for vessels to bring herself back because she can't return to her original form. He explained that the goddess could control any girl that meets her criteria, which was what she did to Sphere, and said Jill was the magic shield protecting Hades from the goddess love. He claimed that the goddess' goal is to marry the Dragon Emperor, and when Jill asked if things would be resolved if he married her, Rave said it wouldn't work because she's after Hades. She then asked another unreasonable question, which made him explain that Kratos was such a jealous goddess that one wrong step would make her unalive every female on the continent. He also revealed that in the unlikely event that Hades accepted the goddess, Jill would die since she was his previous wife, and Jill asked why they were locking her away when she was the magic shield. Rave asked if she knew how to drive off a goddess who had infiltrated the kingdom in the form of the Black Spear, and in response, she brought up the myths which said the heavenly sword was used to seal the goddess away. He told her that the goddess will definitely come after her because she was wearing the dragon consort's ring and transformed into his true form, which was the heavenly sword. She speculated that his plan was to cut her down along with the goddess and pointed out that his actions were contradictory since he was also protecting her. She then realized that Hades was now trying to save her despite his initial plans to use her, and Rave said the Emperor didn't see that he had an easy way of unalive the goddess before claiming that he couldn't be like Hades because he had to protect him. Jill then asked Rave to let her out so she can drive the goddess out, and Rave argued that the only thing that could battle the goddess of Kratos was the heavenly sword, so she knocked him into the ground and said she'd use him. He tried to explain that it was complicated, but she picked him up while saying she'd defeat the goddess, and when he tried to argue further, she revealed that she knew the future. She said the chaos wouldn't stop with the destruction of Baalberg, as a war would break out with Kratos, and Hades would end up getting ostracized by the people despite fighting desperately to save them. She then asked him to help her and proposed that he follow his original plan of unaliving her as well as the goddess if she failed. With tears in her eyes, Jill asked why Hades never asked anyone to save him, and decided that she'd save Hades because she loved him before shattering the barrier with a swing of the sword. Meanwhile, Hades was on the balcony watching the mob go haywire when the goddess showed up and told him that the only one who could love him was her, and in that moment, he remembered Jill telling him to tell everyone that she wanted him to live. He suddenly got sick while worrying about what to do next, and when Hugo showed up, he ordered him to pull back the soldiers since he was the only one who wanted to be in the castle at the moment. Just then, the bell started ringing and Jill loudly challenged the goddess to face her, while claiming that she'd never let her have Hades. The Emperor was stunned that his babe was fighting to protect him, and he tried to stop her, but she told him to back off. When the goddess showed up in the form of a spear, Jill fought her off in the sky with sword moves she learned from Bleach, and when the spear multiplied, she blocked off its attacks with a magical barrier. As she struggled, Hades assisted her by adding his own barrier to hers, allowing her to battle against the spears again. When she realized that the goddess was someone with pride, she threw her sword away and asked for a one-on-one battle, so the spears turned back into a single spear before charging at her. Jill grabbed onto the spear, but then the goddess asked her why she remembered, causing her to realize that it was the goddess Kratos that sent her back in time. Jill then shattered the spear while saying she'd never let her have Hades and tossed her broken parts away. Before Jill could fall from exhaustion, Gerald grabbed her hand and started threatening her before Hades saved her by blasting him from behind. As the lovebirds tried to catch up, Gerald tried to land a sneak attack on Hades, but Hades blocked before tossing the idiot prince back to his kingdom in a magic balloon. At dawn, Hades thanked Jill for helping him and officially proposed to her. In response, she said she wanted to leave him, and she wanted to follow up by telling him she loved him, but Bro passed out before she could. That night, they were chilling in the room and Hades told Jill that he loved her, but she couldn't muster up that courage to say it back, so she argued until he surprised her with a kiss. In the previous timeline, Jill told the princess of Rave named Alencia to surrender so that her life could be spared as a prisoner of war, and when Jill woke up in the present timeline, she started to worry. Later that morning, Jill got excited at the sight of some dragons in the yard, and Hades informed her that he asked his brother to send them so they could accompany them to the imperial capital. Jill started fangirling over the dragons again until she remembered the fact that dragons hated magical energy, and Rave told her to calm down because the magical energy she hated was that of the goddess Kratos. When the dragons bowed towards Rave, she asked how dragons were able to see him, so he explained that the only ones who couldn't see him were humans. Just then, Sphere showed up with Camilla and Zeke, and as she asked whether they were done preparing for their trip, The guard duo were on the verge of soiling themselves because of the mere thought of riding a dragon. When they got on the dragon, they started freaking out, so Sphere calmed them down by informing them that dragons were gentle and clever beings. Hades told Sphere that he'd send someone when they're done making preparations at the capital, and until then, she was the lord of the land. Jill promised to write her a letter as soon as they arrived, and everyone in the kingdom waved them goodbye as they flew off in their dragons to the imperial capital, Rahelm. On their way there, they had some fun and Jill told Hades about how large her family was, causing him to reveal that he was also one of 7 siblings like her. However, in his case, they were from different mothers and they used to be more, but many of them died because of his curse. Hades warned Jill that people in the capital might treat her with disdain like they do for him, and she promised to protect him by snapping anyone who tried to hurt him in half like she did the spear. When they arrived at Rahelm, Jill noticed that Hades was feeling tense, so she tried to calm him down by holding his hand. Just then, some magical defense barriers popped up in their path, and Hades asked her to cover her mouth before steering the dragon up in the sky to avoid the magic blasts which were being fired at them. Zeke and Camilla started asking why they were attacking Hades despite the fact that he's the emperor, and Hades told Jill to look after them and their dragons, but she charged at the barrier instead. She observed that the blasts were only being targeted as Hades and realized that it was how they planned to welcome him back, so she tore through one of the magic defense barriers with a dagger. However, a strange knight slashed her arm with a sword which was covered in dark mist, and when he tried to finish her off, Hades showed up just in time to protect her. As Hades fought off the swordsman, she tried to warn him that the man's sword could seal off magic powers, but she fainted before she could finish her statement. Noticing that Jill was falling, Hades grabbed onto her arm, and this created an opening for the swordsman to slash him from behind. As the lovebirds fell, Zeke and Camilla tried to run in and save them, but they got surrounded by some dragons. When Hades and Jill landed on the ground, the swordsman, who was actually Hades' uncle named George, called Hades a monster because of the fact that his sword couldn't seal off his magic power, and Hades asked him what sword that was. George revealed that it was the real heavenly sword, and said the only reason Hades remained emperor was because his older brother was so frightened of his evil schemes that he made the mistake of believing that the fake holy sword he had was the real heavenly sword. Jill tried to argue that the sword was legit, but George immediately told her to shut up before asking her not to meddle in their affairs. George then told them that he's already sent proclamations throughout the land that Hades was a pretender who has declared himself emperor, and when his soldiers blasted them with magic again, Hades used a spell with Rave that teleported his entire squad out of harm's way. They all appeared outside a house far away, and Rave faded away while telling Jill to look after Hades since he wouldn't be able to move for a while. That evening, Jill and Hades tended to each other's injuries while talking about how they planned to hide out in that cottage from their enemies for the meantime. Hades said they'd be okay because there was a dragon's nest nearby, and explained that there was a place in the mountains where dragons laid their eggs, which Rave told him never to go near because the dragons would unalive him without question. Jill asked why even he, who was the dragon emperor, couldn't go near, and he specified that he couldn't go there without Rave. Jill started feeling sad about the fact that she couldn't see Rave in her present state, and also because the ring of the dragon consort had disappeared. She knew that her sealed magic would replenish after a couple of hours, but she feared that things would play out like the original timeline where George started a rebellion based on the accusations of Hades being a false emperor. She then apologized to Hades for causing his injuries, and he hugged her tightly while apologizing for not being able to protect her. Afterwards, they had a strategy meeting with Zeke and Camilla where they decided to wait for half a year, which was the time it would take for Jill and Hades' magic to come back and George's sword to crumble due to the intensity of their magic which it was holding. 1 month later, Jill started ranting about how they'd all practically become farmers, but everyone seemed comfortable with the country life, and this frustrated her, so she decided to enroll to be a knight. Zeke decided to enroll alongside her, and when they got into the town of Neutrol, Zeke stared at a bunch of wanted posters hung up for Hades, while remembering when Hades told him to offer him up to George in order to save Jill if the need arises. Just then, some dragons started attacking the city, so Jill asked Zeke to cover her while she sprung into battle using Rengoku's moves, and soon, a knight announced that it was all part of the Dragon Knight test. Jill was confused by the fact that the dragon she was fighting froze during their battle. Little did she know that it was the work of her hubby who was watching her from a faraway rooftop with Camilla. Some minutes later, Alencia showed up on a dragon and informed Zeke and Jill that they'd passed the exam before introducing herself as the first princess of the Rave Kingdom and the captain of the Dragon Knights. Seeing this, Jill remembered how Alencia unalived herself in the previous timeline to prevent herself from being taken prisoner, and she shook hands with Alencia in the current time while expressing how pleased she was to be working with her. The next day, Hades handed Jill a lunch pack, and she told Camilla to look after Hades before heading off to meet Zeke at the gate. Jill and Zeke had a little race on the way, and he warned her not to stand out more than she already has, but she told him she'd clap him in all of their training matches. In the city, a random merchant handed Jill an apple for saving him during the dragon attack the previous day before informing her that it was the day of their dragon initiation. Some minutes later, all of the newbie Dragon Knights were gathered in the training grounds, and Alencia informed them that their training for the day would be interacting with her dragon, not fighting it. She explained that the aim of the test was to test their compatibility by checking whether the dragon would greet them or not. When Alencia's dragon Rosa arrived, she told them to take note of the color of its scales before pointing out that the color of a dragon's scales signified their ranks, with Argent being the strongest kind of dragons. She also explained that when dragons have scales of the same color, they're differentiated by eye color, with golden eyes being the highest ranked dragons and purple eyes being the lowest. She then revealed that there's no golden-eyed Argent dragon other than the dragon god Rave, and explained that the black dragons who were next in rank after the white dragon gods were ranked as kings and queens. Since Scarlet Scales were the next on the ranking, Alencia told them that for all practical purposes, Rosa was a dragon of the highest rank, and she also informed them that a Dragon Knight's rank was also determined by their dragon's color. She said the apprentices wore blue armbands because it was a color not found in dragon scales, and pointed out that Dragon Knights who were accepted by high-ranking dragons would definitely be accepted by lower-ranked ones. Alencia informed them that if Rosa returned their greeting, they'd be headed straight for the promotion course, and everyone immediately got hyped after hearing that. When it was time for the dragon initiation, Zeke knelt before Rosa, but the dragon puffed him to the ground with the air from her nostrils, causing Rosa to laugh at him. Zeke was about to freak out, but she calmed him down by telling him that he didn't entirely fail because Rosa didn't ignore him completely, and she added that the senior Dragon Knight's dignity would have been in shreds if the dragon greeted him immediately. Rosa proceeded to reject every knight that came to greet it until it reached Jill's turn, and when Jill kneeled before Rosa, the dragon suddenly started attacking her. Alencia tried to calm Rosa down while telling Jill to run away, and Jill was frozen in fear, so Zeke took her away. That evening, Jill arrived home, and she was depressed over the fact that she got rejected by a dragon despite being a dragon consort, so she went into her room and started sulking over the fact that she felt completely useless. Just then, Hades walked into her room and said Zeke told him about the fact that a dragon hurt her. He sat on her bed and started arguing with Rave over something which Jill couldn't even comprehend. Eventually, he made it clear that they were arguing over the best way to cook Rosa since she hurt his glorious queen, and Jill told Hades not to bother about that since it only scratched her a bit. He continued to argue with Rave until Jill interrupted Hades by holding onto him and telling him that she loved him. The Emperor got startled, and she told him that even if they didn't get along at the moment, they could speak by exchanging fists. She said she felt a lot better thanks to Hades, and went off to eat the lunch which he previously packed for her. As she ate it, she realized that everything wouldn't work out for her just because she was time traveling, so she decided to do the best she could to make Hades happy. When she finished, she told Hades the dish was delicious, and said she'd decided that her new goal was to tame a golden-eyed black dragon. Hades said he hadn't seen one, and told her Rave was asking why she wanted one. She said she wanted to ride one because it would be the same color as her Riz daddy, and as Hades' brain started overheating, she asked him to cheer her on. After she left, Hades lay on the bed and started thinking about how awesome she'd look while riding a black dragon. The next day, Jill arrived at the spot she was assigned to, and a superior officer informed her that her job for the day was to patrol town, which meant that she wouldn't participate in training for the day. He told her to follow the instructions given to her by the unit waiting in the Fountain Plaza and use her apprentice armbands as identification. When she arrived at the fountain, she met a guy named Lawrence, and she remembered how he was her strategist in her previous life. After exchanging introductions, they walked through town and Lawrence explained to her that it was common practice for knights, not compatible with dragons, to be sent on patrol to accustom themselves with the land. When she brought up how messy things were at the capital, he told her they were conducting an investigation to determine if Hattie's was really a fraud, and the people were eager to know if George would die on Hattie's next birthday due to the curse. They arrived at a particular spot where Lawrence tried to riz her up, but ended up creeping her out. Just then, a dragon knight showed up and introduced himself as Risteard, the second prince of the Rave Empire, while asking them to hastily deliver a message to Alencia for him. When they met Alencia, she agreed with Risteard that Hattie's was the true dragon emperor, and Jill got excited over the fact that they were on her side until they revealed that they couldn't officially become allies to him due to the political issues it would cause. Alencia then explained to Jill that Rosa attacked her because she saw her as an equal, and once Risteard heard this, he immediately decided to take Jill as his attendant. After a bit of gaslighting, Alencia agreed with his request. So he took Jill to the training yard where he asked her to greet his dragon Hilda. When she greeted her, Hilda immediately flew away like she'd seen Musin in the flesh, and Risteard started chasing her while asking her to spill her secrets. When Jill got home that evening, Hattie's hugged her while feeding her some fruits, and their lovey-dovey session was interrupted when Risteard suddenly showed up and started chewing Hattie's out for being a bum. Jill explained that she led him there because he was a nice guy, and as the rest of that gang watched the two brothers bicker, she swore that she'd make sure they found a way to escape this pathetic farm life they were living. Sometime later, Risteard brought Hattie's and the others to meet Alencia and explained to her that the reason the dragon saw her as an equal was because she's the dragon consort. Hattie's said he can't do anything about their current situation because Duke Neutral, the person who supports Alencia, doesn't approve of him. And he pointed out that Risteard was in the same situation before saying that he wouldn't allow himself to be stabbed in the back by false allies. When Risteard brought up the fact that Hattie's magic power had been sealed, he said it was the perfect time to get rid of him, but added that their uncle could self-destruct before that time. When Alencia asked what he meant, he said he'd leave things alone to be resolved, and as he tried to walk away, Jill held him back. So he told her that he didn't have any intention of yielding despite the fact that he respected his wife. In response, Jill tackled him to the floor and yelled at him before telling him to at least talk to his siblings. She said Risteard searched for him because he was genuinely worried about him, and when Risteard wanted to start yapping nonsense again, she stopped him and told him to talk more kindly because her Riz daddy was very weary of others like a large untamed dog. Risteard then told Hattie's that he was happy to see that he was fine, and Hattie's advised him to keep his defiance of their uncle to a bare minimum since he had a little sister in the castle. Alencia said she'd pretend she didn't see Hattie's as well, and said she was glad to see that Hattie's was doing well, all thanks to Jill. Risteard then started yelling at Hattie's for being a creepy lolicon, so Jill told him that she married him of her own free will and stated that it was her duty as a wife to make him happy. This made Hattie's non-existent brain start overheating, so Camille and Zeke laid him to rest by the couch, and when he asked Jill to come home with him, she suddenly asked Risteard and Alencia to help them. She explained that they were also subjects of the Empire despite being Hattie's half-siblings, and said she knew they weren't comfortable with George doing as he pleased. Risteard said she was right, but Alencia told her not to make indiscreet statements because they all have their own circumstances, and added that reality was often naive. However, Jill said she was the one who was naive and immediately rushed to pin her down to the table while ordering Zeke to hold Risteard hostage as well. While holding down Alencia, she told her that she should have restrained her and used Hattie's as a hostage if she wanted to live in peace. And when Risteard asked what she was doing, the guard duo let him know that if he makes even the slightest move, they'd reduce him to pork chops. Jill then asked Alencia to decide if she'd ally herself with Hattie's or the false Emperor George, and just then, a guard came by to announce an opportunity, allowing Alencia to pull an Uno reverse on Jill. While holding Jill at knife point, she asked her to release her to let her send her knight away, so Jill ordered Zeke and Camilla to hide Hattie's before Alencia called in the knight. The knight informed her that George was setting fire to the town, and she wondered why he'd do that when they were in Duke Neutral's territory, so the guard explained that George got reports that Hattie's was hiding in that town. Just then, a fleet of dragons appeared by the window, and Hattie's decided to go face them, so Jill offered to join him. Alencia asked Hattie's if he called them, and the guard soiled himself in fear when he heard Hattie's name. Hades asked if her plan was to tie him up, but in response, both of his siblings offered to accompany him, so they all got on top of dragons as they flew into the city. When they arrived at the burning parts of town, Hades fed some magic into the dragon he was riding, allowing it to blast some water from its mouth, which put out the fires in his path. Risteard was stunned to see a dragon putting out fires instead of starting one, and Alencia knew that she was witnessing the power of the true Dragon Emperor. After putting out the fires, they converted in a broken-down part of town where Risteard informed Hades that there were no casualties because of his fast. Everyone evacuated, and then he offered to mobilize the Dragon Knight Company he created in order to join Hades in battle, but Hades pointed out that Risteard's grandfather Leosatz will oppose it. In response, Risteard told him that they were a ducal house only because they protected the Empire, and said that what happened to his elder brother wasn't Hades' fault. Just then, Alencia showed up and told Hades that she wanted him to meet Faris, who'd been secretly helping her before revealing that Faris was proposing to get engaged with Hades as a sign of peace. A while later, the gang met up with Faris, who first revealed that Lawrence was her attendant before revealing that in an upcoming birthday she'd soon be taken over by the goddess Kratos, which was why she wanted to resolve things beforehand. She let them know that she wasn't allied with Gerald and proposed that the best way to solve everything was to have a political marriage with Hades, and Hades was about to leave after hearing her nonsense before Lawrence stopped him by informing him that the nobles in the town they saved from fire were being targeted. Hearing this, Jill asked Hades to accept their proposal as it would give them an advantage in that battle, and Hades was about to lose it until she explained that they only had to be engaged in rumors, which would be the best way to settle everything. Afterwards, Hades was cooking a Gordon Ramsay special in the kitchen, along with Risteard, when Alencia showed up to inform them that Vissel said he'd support them. After meeting up with Lawrence, Jill went inside the house where she saw Hades feeling depressed because he thought she was secretly dating Lawrence. She went into his room to comfort him, and she sat on his lap while they talked about all the brainrot rom-com animes they planned to watch together. The next morning, Alencia told the rest of the gang that Vissel had sent his troops as reinforcements for them under the pretense of sending these soldiers to search for Hades, and she said once these men had joined them, they'd all return to that stronghold. She also informed them that it would be difficult for them to move since they couldn't use dragon knights and their reinforcements were infantry and cavalry, so Risteard worried that they'd be defenseless if their uncle dispatched his dragons against them. Hades then suggested going with them, but Risteard argued that he should go in Hades' stead because he's the emperor and also because he could barely use magic at the moment. However, Hades said he was capable of making dragons call him pappy even in his weakened state, and the two of them started arguing over the matter until Jill told Hades that his bro was only concerned for him, so Hades agreed to bring Risteard along as an assistant. Alencia informed them that she wouldn't be able to leave the building they were currently in, and said if their uncle starts acting suspiciously, it would serve as a warning to Vissel as well. She also explained that the official reason for Risteard's presence is joint military drills, and this was what they'd use an explanation if he's discovered with her knights. She then hugged the two brothers and told them to get along so that they'd return together in one piece. Jill was surprised that the almighty Hades couldn't defy an order from his sister, and Alencia asked her to look after her brothers for her. A while later, the gang moved through the forest and Zeke failed to scout a proper path ahead for the group, so Camilla and Lawrence chewed him out for it. Risteard got worried that their scouts were a couple of blockheads, but Jill assured him that they were good at their jobs. The three of them continued arguing until Zeke kicked Lawrence's horse, causing it to run ahead alongside his own, while Camilla insulted them from behind. Hades was pleased by the fact that the three dumb knights became friends quickly, and he asked Jill to go join them in having their fun, but that only made Jill uncomfortable because she knew Hades was still worried about Lawrence. When she asked if he was, he said he wasn't bothered in a sarcastic tone before straight up ranting about how he intended to skin him alive until Risteard told him to cut it out. Jill said the rumors about her and Lawrence were being spread to confuse the enemy, and Hades said he already knew about it, but still ranted about how uncomfortable it made him feel. Risteard then told Hades to behave more like a dragon emperor since his guards were watching, and after he left, Jill confessed to Hades that his bromance with Risteard was making her jealous. As they moved along, Camilla told Jill and Hades about how Lawrence had been secretly watching them and asked if they were okay with letting a suspicious person like him join their squad when the troop handover they were heading to could be a trap. Jill revealed to her that Lawrence worked under Prince Gerald and also informed her that his older sister was taken to the King of Crotto's Southern Empress's palace before saying that Lawrence worked to become Gerald's subordinate in order to free his sister. Camilla said she felt sorry for him, but she still suspected that Gerald was controlling him, and in response, Jill said her goal was to drag Lawrence into all their mess so that it could probably make Gerald get in trouble as well. Just then, Sauté started making noises, so Jill commanded him to stand down, and Hades started glazing Jill because of how talented she was at controlling everything. She asked Hades if he got worried when she acts freely, and he said he didn't because no matter who ended up betraying him, he'd have her by his side. That evening, Lawrence joined Camilla and Zeke by the campfire and told them that the chances of Prince Vissel's troops' handover being a trap was 50-50, and he came up with a plan to counter in case it turned out to be a trap. He presumed that they could be pretending to form an alliance with them in order to sneak into Neutral, so he came up with a battle formation with Jill at the center, which would allow them to effectively counter it. When Lawrence asked if Jill said anything about him, Camilla said Jill wishes for him to return safely to his sister, and this made him laugh. He told them that his sister was doing okay even though she was at the inner palace because the king now swung the other way. Just then, some dragons flew by and Camilla was alarmed because she knew the Imperial Army's dragon knights were now on the move. Lawrence said they should leave it for now because they wouldn't be able to make it in time, and said that as long as Faris was there, no one would be able to press them too hard. This was the reason Lawrence left Faris in the kingdom, and also because he didn't want to owe Jill too many favors given that they'd soon be enemies on the battlefield. He suggested a hiding spot for them to regroup if they're attacked, and told them that he'd make sure their group wins in order to secure his future. As the three of them discussed further, Lawrence confessed that he had feelings for Jill, and he wondered what she saw in Hades until Zeke told him about how the Emperor was also a good guy. The next day, the group continued their journey to the meeting spot, and suddenly, Alencia arrived on her dragon. Jill asked the rest of them to watch the horses while she went to meet Alencia, and when approached her, Alencia suddenly held her hostage again. Just then, some guards surrounded them, and she apologized to the gang before George arrived and commanded his guards to seize Hades. Alencia explained that she was doing it to protect Risteard, and Jill started crying as she worried for Hades. In an attempt to protect his brother, Risteard ordered their guards to cover him as he escaped, but the Sigma Lord ordered them to leave him and run instead. He then picked up a sword and destroyed a bunch of enemy knights with a tornado before charging at George. When Hades tried to unalive Alencia to save Jill, she stopped him at the last minute and said some comforting words which made him fall on her chest. George then tossed Jill in the air and said he had no further use for her since Hades had been captured before ordering his dragon to barbecue her. Afterwards, George rode on his dragon alongside Alencia, and she told him that Jill's body was yet to be found, but he was convinced that she was dead since no one could survive a blast of dragon fire. At the moment, Hades was confined in a carriage where he sat on top of an anti-magic barrier. Meanwhile, Jill woke up in a weird spiritual world where she met a black dragon who immediately belittled her for being a pipsqueak before admitting that she had courage for looking directly at her without soiling her undergarments. When Jill asked if she was the one who saved her, the black dragon said she did it at the Scarlet Dragon's request, and proceeded to say that she realized the reason the Scarlet Dragon was so unnerved when she met Jill was because her ring and magic powers had been taken from her. Jill then introduced herself to the dragon, and she tried to tell her about Hades' situation, but the black dragon cut her off by saying she couldn't return to the human realm alive since she wasn't the dragon consort. The black dragon then fired a massive dark blast at Jill, but Jill avoided the blast by hiding behind the rock, and she asked the hot-headed reptile why it was attacking her despite the fact that it saved her a few moments ago. The black dragon told her that they were in a dragon's nest, which was not a place where ordinary humans were meant to trespass, and she tried telling the beast that the dragon emperor was in trouble at the moment, but she responded that she had no interest in helping out a Lolican. When the dragon fired another blast at the rock she was hiding behind, Jill jumped away from the rock and into another part of the cave where she found a broken dragon eggshell on the floor which had magic power flowing through it. At the same time, the rest of the gang were at a hiding spot, and after Lawrence confirmed that they'd shaken off their enemies, and they talked about how George used a special weapon which looked like a stuffed toy to destroy half their troops, causing the others to retreat. Risteard said their first priority was to protect the lives of their people and brought up how an escaped Angry Birds character saved them by taking on the teddy bear machine in a fight. When Lawrence asked what they could do, Risteard said that since Alencia betrayed them, they had no other allies and couldn't return to Neutral to retrieve their dragons. Lawrence pointed out that they needed dragons to reverse their situation, so Camilla suggested calling through dragons, but Risteard told her it was impossible at the moment. Zeke said the relationship between humans and dragons were just as one-sided as he thought, so Risteard enlightened him on the fact that dragons were willingly letting humans ride on them because without their protection, no one would survive the experience of riding on their back due to the thinness of the air. He also presumed that they'd already disposed of his dragon Hilda, and everyone realized how cooked they were. Meanwhile, Hades was daydreaming about a happy life with Jill and the others, and when he woke up, he saw Risteard, who offered him some food while expressing her worry for him. In response, Hades asked her why she was offering someone who was headed for his execution to eat, and she explained that she and Vissel were planning to persuade their uncle to let him live as a normal person. However, Hades refused the idea by telling her that he was the Dragon Emperor. Back in the Dragon Cave, the Black Dragon asked Jill why she stopped the Dragon Emperor from unaliving his betrayer and proceeded to say that her naive mindset made her unfit to be the Dragon Consort. She continued to insult her until Jill came out and brought up a previous statement she made about how the goddess Kratos was the one who was sealing her magic powers. She asked if George's heavenly sword was made from Kratos' sacred spear, and the Black Dragon confirmed her suspicions to be true by pointing out that it was the only thing which could seal the Dragon Emperor's magic. Jill started laughing like a maniac, after which she boldly told the Black Dragon to get out of her way so that she could go save her boy toy, and the Black Dragon reminded her that no normal human who entered the Dragon Cave was permitted to leave alive. The dragon fired a dark flame blast at her, but she deflected it with her mere fists while leaping towards the dragon, and she cut herself with the dragon eggshell she found. She told the Black Dragon to obey her before delivering a brutal punch which took the dragon out. As the dragon lay on the floor, she told Jill about a golden-eyed black dragon egg in the cave with them, and when Jill went to comfort it, it suddenly reacted to her, causing the mama dragon to be stunned since she'd waited hundreds of years for it to hatch or react to anything. Afterwards, the Black Dragon agreed to let Jill ride on its back, and they flew together to the surface where Jill offered to name her stake, but she refused. At the same time, Alencia told Hades that she intended to die by Jill's hand as atonement for being the worst elder sister in the world. A while later, Jill arrived at the team's hideout with her dragon, as well as some other dragons which included Hilda, and they were joined by Satay, who brought the battered bear machine with him. Some hours later, the team stormed into the enemy base on their dragons, and while the rest of the team battled against the guards, Jill got in a one-on-one sword match against Alencia. Jill noticed that the magic being used to hold Hades was dragon-slaying magic, and it didn't take long before Alencia shattered Jill's sword. Before she could finish her off, Risteard showed up with a spear and asked his sister why she betrayed Hades. She tried to gaslight Risteard into joining her, but he argued with her until George made a dramatic entrance. Risteard challenged his uncle directly, but George sent him flying with a single sword swing, and Alencia tried to beg him to let her handle her brother. But George straight up called her a traitorous wench. He then gave Risteard a scroll which revealed that Hades isn't related to them by blood, and he fell to his knees as he realized that their entire family other than Hyde's weren't descendants of Rave. He suggested making it public, but George said the best thing to do was to erase Hades from existence, which was his own twisted way of protecting the people. Alencia told Risteard that accepting George's plan would end the chaos without causing a large-scale war, and when George moved to unalive Hades again, Jill challenged him directly. However, when he tried to smite her with his sword, Hades made a dramatic entrance by freezing everyone at once. As Hades' power walked towards them, he told George that his story was so surprising that even Rave lost his cool when he heard it, and he said he wasn't interested in having a conversation because he was the one who held the power of life and death at that moment. Hades told them about how he hoped to start a family and understand everyone despite being called a cursed emperor, and Alencia tried to talk to him, but he told the traitor to shut her filthy mouth. He called George a filthy traitor, and George swore to unalive him before firing a dark blast from his sword, which caused an explosion when it made impact with Hades. However, the attack didn't even leave a scratch on Hades, and when he called Hades a monster, he said George was the monster because of how he used the Empire and their people as an excuse to unalive him. Hades then unleashed an aura more intimidating than all for ones while claiming that he'd destroyed all of them, and he pushed them all back with a dark blast. When he was about to finish off Valencia, Jill grabbed onto him and begged him to look at her instead. Hades brought up how they used the curse to blame everything on him and said they were the ones who shouldn't have been born and not him. When he angrily declared that he'd destroy them, Jill got flashbacks of the past timeline when he was indeed a demon lord, and she started to worry that things would turn out that way if she doesn't do anything to stop him. Hades continued his vengeful crash out by preparing a massive dark blast while swearing to make them regret ever being born the same way they did for him, and Jill told him that she'd bear 10 of his children. Hearing this, Hades' dark spell vanished, and Jill went on to talk about how Risteard and Valencia could become in-laws with them by marrying 2 out of their 10 children, and she said it would make them a perfect family before begging him not to give up on humanity. She said despite the fact that Risteard and Valencia weren't related to him by blood, they were good siblings who took care of him, and with tears in her eyes, she said she could become a family with him despite not being his blood. She then promised to make him happy once again, and this made the Sigma Lord get tear-eyed as he smiled at her. Just then, Rave appeared as a sword and George started emitting an ominous aura as he swore to unalive Hades. However, Hades picked up his sword and told the traitor George that he'd make him pay for taking his title. He asked his ex-uncle to retreat and told him his body would rot away if he continued wielding the fake holy sword. However, George fired a blast at him, which he easily countered with a dark blast of his own, and Risteard got in between them as he tried to convince George to give up since Hades was ready to acknowledge them as members of the Rave family. George said he'd never believe Hades and Valencia joined in by saying she believed Hades before admitting that he was a great emperor for forgiving them despite their crimes. George still felt that Hades would betray them in the future, but Valencia told him that what they needed the most at the moment was the strength to trust. However, George told her to shut up and started running wild again until the rest of the gang surrounded him, and eventually, his body transformed into a larger version of the Grade 3 curse that slimed Megumi. The black dragon started fighting off against the monster, and when she bit one of his wings, he realized he wasn't that guy, so he decided to run away into the city in order to roast some humans instead. Noticing this, Jill ordered the knights to protect everyone, and she called onto her black dragon as she prepared to head into battle. But Hades stopped her and said he wanted to be the only one to fight. He ordered the black dragon to help Jill rescue their people, and he told Jill to stay out since she hadn't fully recovered her magic before teleporting away with the sacred sword. He appeared in front of Monster George and blocked several of his blasts before using his Bankai to destroy him while Jill watched in awe of her pappy. Half a month later, Jill was worried about the fact that her magic was yet to return while Risteard and Hades goofed off together as usual. Jill asked Valencia to look after Hades during his victory parade later that day, and when she talked about his, she'd added an age. Hades fell on the floor as he regretted not being aware of his babe's birthday. He decided to cancel the parade and hold a birthday party for Jill instead, but everyone told him it was impossible, and Jill calmed him down by saying they could hold a big party after the parade together. Valencia informed them that Lawrence was assigned to be one of the guards that was escorting Faris out of Baleburg, so Jill teleported to the port with the help of Rave in order to meet Faris. Jill brought up the fact that Gerald was the one who gave George the false heavenly sword and accused Faris of being the one who made it. Faris admitted that she was responsible, and when Jill asked what her goal was, Faris suddenly stood up from her wheelchair and summoned the sacred spear of Kratos. After she explained her evil scheme, Jill summoned the heavenly sword and pointed it at her while saying she was their enemy. However, Faris told her not to get executed this time, and Jill was stunned that she knew about her time traveling, but Faris proceeded to reveal that her plan was to make Hades hers. She then started gaslighting Jill by predicting that she'd cast Hades aside the same way she did for Gerald in her previous life, but Jill boldly claimed that she'd defeat her and make Hades happy. Just then, Faris attacked her and she tried to block, but the magic power was so overwhelming that Rave had to teleport them away from the area in order to save them. Meanwhile, Hades gave a speech which made the people of the kingdom cheer for him, but his aura count became negative when he suddenly started simping for Jill on stage. However, Jill gleefully hugged him in front of everyone before announcing to the kingdom that she'd devote her life into making Haddies happy. Who do you think will scream louder in bed between Haddies and Jill when they kickstart their baby-making process? Let us know in the comments. That's all for today's video. If you like anime recaps like this, check out this video here.